Welcome to another episode of the Franchise Academy. My name is Tom Scarda. This is the place to come for everything franchising. Whether you want to buy a franchise, sell a franchise, learn how to be a lawyer for a franchise, which is what we'll be talking about today. So I have my friend Elias Correa Menendez, who's with Tremblay Law Firm, and it's so cool because Elias he comes from Puerto Rico originally. He did college, the undergrad in Puerto Rico. He went to Tulane University, and then he started working and helping out a franchise group that owned a bunch of McDonald's, and that's how he got his feet wet in franchising. We have a bunch of questions for him about franchising. Why do you need a lawyer? Also, if you're going to franchise a business, why do you need an attorney, especially? And we're going to hash it all out today. So, welcome, Elias.
Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
This is so great. It's so great that you're here, and that we get to do this. It's such a grand opportunity. So, you were born and raised in Puerto Rico, is that right?
I was born and raised in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and then eventually went to law school in the Catholic University and then did an LLM in Tulane in New Orleans.
That's so great. The Garden District of New Orleans, that's where it is. Okay.
It's there, the Garden District, very far away from the French Quarter. It's very safe, very nice.
Very safe and kind of just a trolley ride away. Um,
Beautiful.
yeah, I love that area. And that restaurant, Commander's Palace, is right near there in the Garden District. I
Oh
love
my,
it,
yeah.
even as a New York guy.
Bringing memories back, Tom.
Yeah, bringing all sorts of great memories back. So you're with Tremblay, which is located in Miami, is that right?
Yes, we're in Miami, Florida.
Awesome. And so you guys are expanding at a rapid pace the franchise practice part of your firm. So that's why I want to have you on because you guys are doing some innovative things to help franchisors and also to help franchisees as someone's buying a franchise to get their franchise agreement reviewed, which is an important step. But before we get to there, how does somebody franchise their business? Like I got this great business and I want to expand it through the United States. How does that work?
That's a great question, Tom. And we have helped people from Argentina, from Europe, and other places franchise their operations. But for you to be able to franchise, you need to be ready. And what does that mean? That means that you have a concept, you have a brand, and you have a system in place. If you have an idea of a concept, if you have people interested in your concept, that is great. But that means that you're doing something amazing and people want to buy into what you're doing. But that doesn't mean that you're ready to franchise. That means that you're ready to have a conversation with somebody like Tom, with a franchise expert consultant that can help you develop that brand and establish your market. Once you understand what your market looks like and you have systems in place that will allow you to comply with your obligations as a franchisor, that means to me that you're ready to start the process.
That's great. And so, from my understanding, you're not a franchise until you get an approved franchise disclosure document that's approved by the Federal Trade Commission. Is that right?
Okay, so you have different registration states. You have states where you have to do a lot of work. You have states like California, for example, New York, you need to have the state go through the FDD, and they make a lot of changes. They want to make sure that you're complying with the regulation. You have states like Florida, where you have to go to the Department of Agriculture actually and get an approval there, an exemption to be able to submit the franchise. But you're correct, Tom. Once you have an FDD, and you have the right framework and the right approval process, you become a franchisor. That document has to be approved every year. And this document was created, like you mentioned, by the FTC. And the idea is to create an uniform system where the franchisees can understand what they're getting into, can understand their obligations under this franchise agreement, because there are many, but also to ensure that we have serious franchisors.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that the thing that's interesting to me, there's so many things I want to say about this. So the FDD is really your best friend as a franchisor and as a franchisee buying a franchise. In my opinion, buying a franchise or investing in a franchise is probably the most transparent investment you could make because that FDD, the Federal Trade Commission, mandates that they put in there things like, is there any litigation against this company or perpetrated by the company for like the past 10 years? Which I think is a brilliant thing to know before you get involved. How much it is to open and operate the franchise. I mean, all this stuff is in there, and it's all in black and white. It's easy to read. It's boring, but it's important. But in addition, the FDD lays out everything for you. But just because a franchise gets their FDD, does it mean that they actually make money?
Absolutely not. It's a piece
Mhm.
of paper that a lawyer will get you. There are 23 items that they're uniform. You have to disclose in the FDD. And like Tom said, the purpose is so that you give sufficient information to the franchisee, the potential franchisee, so that they understand what they're getting into. And I love this process because when you buy a business, you do your own due diligence and you don't know what information you're going to get from your potential seller. But when you're acquiring a franchise, the federal government already did the due diligence for you. The checklist is there, those 23 items. And those 23 items are very important because if the franchisor is not honest, they are opening up for liability. So that's why it's very important. But it's just a piece of paper. For you to be able to make money, you have to actually sell the franchise. You need to get franchisees. So that's how you go to that step. And there's a bunch of different models. You can get your own franchisees. You can have somebody like a broker get franchises for you. But that's the importance. You need to have a plan and you need to have somebody behind you that can help you achieve that goal. Unless you already know everybody in the world and you can get it yourself. You save some money, but most people need to get help. You need a team.
You need a team. Absolutely. I think that's so important. So if someone is out there listening and they're interested in a particular franchise, they contact the company. After a few conversations, usually the company will issue a franchise disclosure document to that potential buyer. Now they get it. What should they do next?
All right, so you're gonna have 14 days by law before you can actually sign the obligations so that you can do your due diligence. That means you need to investigate that FDD, but it's a really long document. Most of them have a few hundred pages. So you need to get an expert, a franchise attorney that already has seen 100 of this and they know what they're looking for.
Right.
Because most of these documents, if you're especially going to these traditional franchise source, they're not gonna make either any changes or many changes. So the important thing here is not to negotiate necessarily, but for you to understand your obligations. Because if after you understand all the obligations, you want to move forward, I'm happy, go for it. But some people may not want to move forward after they see the financials or after they see a few things in that FDD. And that's what we're here for.
That's so great. So I appreciate you saying that. So what you're saying is, as an attorney, you're not going to say, "Hey, Tom, this franchise is great. I love their FDD." What you're going to say is, "Hey, Tom, look at, item 7 and the cost of their XYZ. Are you comfortable with that?" And also, you know, all the stuff that's in here is standard. And if there's something that's not standard, then you say, "Hey, Tom, this is something that you need to really ask them about because I've never seen this in 100 FDDs that I've seen. I've never seen this item." Am I characterizing that correctly?
Yeah, and it happens a lot, especially when you have brand new franchisors that are not very experienced and they're trying to learn the system and they go a little bit outside the box in a way that it's not the best for the franchisees. And there's some negotiation power that you have, especially when you're the first, second, or third franchisee.
Right.
But yeah, when we see something that doesn't look like the other few hundred franchise disclosure document that we've seen, that's a red flag. And that's something that we have to bring because it could be to your benefit or to your great disadvantage. So I'm not going to tell you whether a business is a good business. That's your broker, that's you, that's your accountant. I'm going to tell you whether you're legally protected and what things we can do to ensure that you protect your dream and you don't buy a nightmare.
Hmm. I like that. Protect your dream, don't buy a nightmare.
Yeah.
That is a great catchphrase. You should put that on your business card.
I like it.
That is a great one. I got to write that down. So when when you first get an FDD, what I tell my clients or my candidates is, you don't have to read the whole thing, right away. First, you want to figure out is, whether you like the culture. Is it really something that you want to do? Do you recommend looking at some specific items first? Um, and instead of, starting on page one, like let's get to like, I don't know, item three in litigation first. Because if they have a whole bunch of litigation, I would tell them, don't buy that franchise. But how do you feel about that? What items are important?
Absolutely, litigation number one. You want to make sure that you don't go into a very litigious relationship. We have seen franchisors that they have very few lawsuits. And again, lawsuits are not bad necessarily. You're all going to have, if you're in a business of running a corporation and you're everywhere, you're going to have some issues, and that's normal. Now, the problem is when everybody's suing the franchisor to try to get their money back. So when we go through the FDD, we go through the lawsuits, and we actually do some investigation, and we tell our client why this is happening. And it could be a very legitimate issue, or it could be just a problem. And that's how we find out. Item three. Then you gotta go through the disclosure of the financials, because the franchisors have to disclose their financials. And you're gonna see forecasts, you're gonna see pro formas. Those are interesting, right? But don't read too much into that, because that's the future. We don't know what's gonna happen, but you need to look into the past to understand the present.
Right. So they get independently audited. And that's when having an accountant can help. Because like me, I can't read like an audited statement like that. So I would need an accountant, and that's what I've done when I bought franchises in the past. Um, and so that's definitely important. How do you feel about calling franchisees that own the business already?
Calling franchisees that already own a business? Give me an example. What do you mean?
So what I mean is validation calls where, I think I want to buy XYZ franchise. Should I call the franchise owners that already exist in XYZ franchise?
Okay, so that's a very tricky question, because you're gonna have some confidentialities that you need to protect, and they have others too. But I always think it's good to do some investigation and understand how things are happening. If you have an opportunity to talk to other franchisees that are in the situation that you're hoping to be soon, do it. But be careful with the territory. It has to be comparable to what you're getting into. Because if you're in a suburban area in South Florida, that could be very different than if you're in Montana, for example.
Right.
So you need to make sure that you stay within those parameters.
That's a good point.
Information is good, Tom.
Right. Yeah, it's not really bad information. That could be, but when you're talking to the franchise owners, they're giving you, the real truth. Then they don't care if you buy it or not. So they're going to tell you the good, bad, and ugly. And that's what I found in my experience. I also have found that if you talk to somebody that's in the next territory from where you're thinking about buying, sometimes they might try to talk you out of it.
Yeah, I see that a lot, because they have other plans. But you're right, Tom. Especially when you see a lot of noise, that's a problem. When you see a franchisee saying, "Man, don't get into this. I'm trying to get out right now, and this is why," and then you hear it again. But for most of the time, you're gonna get good franchisors that want to grow their business, that are actually going to deliver. So that's what you're looking for. You're looking for good stories, right? Stories of success, where they tell you, "We're doing great. This franchisor is a pleasure to work with. They do great with marketing, and whenever we have an issue, because it's going to happen, they listen to us."
Right. And that's what you want to hear. Exactly that. Whether they have a franchisee council that acts as a liaison between the franchisees and the franchisor, all these kind of things are stuff to look for and ask about when you're talking to the franchise company and also the franchisees. But I also feel like if you're talking to a franchise company, whether they have 10 franchisees or 1,000, you're going to find a significant bell curve, just like anything else in life. So what I mean is that, say there's 10 franchise owners, you're going to have two that are doing phenomenally well. You're going to have one who's on the downside and failing, and then the rest are going to be in the upper curve and they're doing just fine. And so you want to talk to both ends and realize and try to find out what is the middle, what is the average, what's really happening there. You know, some people just come to something with a bad attitude, and so they might not be doing as well. And other people are doing great. You got to find out why. Do they have like a connection in the neighborhood? Do they have a business in that neighborhood already? And that's why they already have contacts. So you got to really dig in and find out what the reality is. Just don't take everything for granted.
Right. And if you're gonna have these conversations, my strong recommendation, and I tell this to everybody about life, ask them, if you could do this all over again, what would you do differently?
That's the magic question. That is the magic question because that sums up everything. I have 39 questions to ask franchise owners when people get to this point in an investigation process. And that's what I say is like that, because you really can't ask somebody, you can, I don't know if they'll answer, you know, how much money do you make? You know, people get funny around money as
Yeah.
they say. But if you ask, all right, now you've been in this thing for a year, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, whatever it is, would you do it again? What would you do differently? That tells you everything you need to know right there.
And there's something about this question, people get excited about talking about themselves and their experience and teaching other people. Everybody likes to teach others about how to do better in life. And to me, that question unlocks so much.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, when I was a franchise owner in my first franchise, I had a smoothie concept. In 2002, I was franchise owner of the year among 200 units. And so I was getting a lot of phone calls from prospective franchise owners. And I spent a lot of time on the phone talking to these folks. But I loved it for the reasons that you said. You know, I was like, look at, you know, I was a government guy. I was working in a New York City subway and I quit and bought this franchise. And now you know, I'm making so much money and I have so much freedom and time and flexibility and you know, somebody would say, "Oh, I just need 20 minutes of your time." And I would keep them on the phone for an hour because I was so excited about the concept. So when you're getting reactions like that in your validation calls, you know you're onto something good. Then you have to figure out, okay, it's good for these folks. Is it good for me? Is it going to
Mhm.
fit my lifestyle? Because if it's
Exactly.
theirs, I get that, but is it going to fit mine?
Yeah, and understand what the commitment is as well. Every franchisor is different. Some franchisors want you to be in your store. Some others want you to be actively manager. Some others will really don't care too much about you. You just have to like make sure that things are managed correctly. But one thing that I wanted to tell everybody is you will see a lot of success stories and a lot of like bad stories. And I bet you the success stories are people who are engaged, people who follow the system very well, but people who know the games of the room. It's like when you're playing baseball, if you don't know the rules of the game, you're not going to play that well. And the rules are there. Anybody can read the rules, right? So that's the basic. You need to understand which game you're playing. And
Yeah.
if you understand that, you have a better chance to succeed.
Very well said. Um, I believe that so much, and and if you feel like you're, I don't know, like a renegade, like you want to change the system, you want to buy McDonald's, but you want purple arches because you don't like golden arches, don't buy the franchise because you're going to end up in trouble. You know.
Exactly.
So counselor, tell me, what is one myth that you think you might be able to break about franchising or about using a franchise attorney for an agreement or something like that? Anything come to mind for you?
Yeah, something about uniformity. You see that you have 23 items, you have the FTC regulations, you have a law that tells you that franchise is a model that is uniform. So there are two myths. So I should not even care about reviewing the FDD because it's so uniform that once it should be okay. No, you should read into it because you never know the way it was prepared. And the fact that it supposedly was approved by an organization, you have states that do not look at them. You have three types of states. You have registration states and non-registration states. If you live in New York and California, they have to look at your FDD. And you at least have the hope that somebody looked at this document and it not only meets the minimum, but also meets the local regulations and rules, because a franchise in Florida has to observe the laws in Florida. So uniformity is a concept about the basic foundation of the franchise operations. But if you're in different states, you need to comply with different laws. And that's something that you need a team, like I mentioned, that can give you that support.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Having the team is great. I mean, that's a big takeaway for me is making sure you have the right attorney, the right accountant, the right franchise consultant. All these things have to line up and help you be more successful in your business. And I'm a franchise advisor and coach for almost 20 years. I've been matching people with franchise opportunities, and the service is free of charge. And I tell so many people about this, about what I do, and they're like, "Oh, I never knew there was somebody who did that." And so I just want to let people know, there's people out there that can help you get to the right franchise for you. And then once you do and you need help with your franchise agreement, then you need to call Tremblay Law. So I want to thank you so much for being on the show. This has been a great, insightful conversation for me. And of course, we could do more in the
Yes.
future.
So I love talking to you. You're a friend, and I enjoy these conversations. And we learn because we prepare for this podcast and we learn more about it. We polish it a little bit of each other. So I really appreciate you inviting me. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be
Yeah.
here with you and your audience.
Thank you. Thank you. It's my honor to have you. So again, I appreciate you coming on. We will do more. All of Tremblay Law's information will be on the franchiseacademy.com. Check that out. Ring them up if you have questions about franchising. Ring me up. I could help.